A significant technical challenge that I've encountered this semester while working on the project is a deployment of our existing project code base from the local development environment into the production server. So currently the code base for the project composes of three components. That would be the point controller that runs on the hardware and is installed on the NUC device directly. The web UI that represents the visual presentation of the network state, and the REST API that facilitates the communication between the web UI and the database. So those three components needed to be deployed, taking into consideration the specifics and challenges associated with each one of them. So for the POM controller, the challenge is in the fact that it's physically attached to the hardware, meaning that only one person can be working on the code base at a time. In order to overcome this issue, we had to install a remote access software, specifically we're using TeamViewer, that allows any given team member to access the code base and restart the controller as necessary at any given point in time. As far as the web UI aspect of the system is concerned, the challenges associated with the deployment of the web UI revolve around the security concerns, since the page itself does contain authentication for the user, meaning that the integrity of credentials while users logging into the production server is a security concern. For the web UI, a secondary concern with the deployment would be the fact how tightly coupled it is to the API server, specifically the question of what is going to be displayed for the end user if the API server is down. And then finally, for the third component, for the API server itself, which is implemented as a Django server running RESTful framework. One of the concerns is the fact that while deploying a Django application, a regular web server like Apache or Nginx wouldn't be able to run it, since Django has to run as a VCGI process. The secondary challenge with the API server is also the fact that it contains the administration backend with the login page, so the authentication process and the integrity of the credentials would be a security concern that needed to be addressed. So in order to solve those problems, for the POM controller, as I mentioned before, we had to implement a remote access software allowing us to work on that code base. For the web UI, in order to address the security concerns, I went ahead and installed an SSL certificate on the production server that imposes encryption while the credentials are being transferred throughout the network, and set up the web server, which on the production box is Nginx, to force all the traffic coming through port 80 to get redirected into port 443, forcing that HTTPS encryption. For the API component of the code base, for the deployment purposes, the problem of running Django on the production server itself was addressed by installing an application server. In this case, I'm using Green Unicorn. That's the server that is running Django application as a VCGI process. And the web server that is installed in the production box, and in our case that's Nginx, is reverse proxying all the HTTP requests coming to Django API endpoints, and that allows for the application server to run the Django while the web server is handling reverse proxying those requests. Further, to address the security concerns with the deployment, I have installed an SSL certificate on the API production server as well. That way, all the communication to and back from the server is encrypted and secure. As far as what I would do differently next time is concerned, as far as the security concerns with API and web UI, I would probably implement the same strategy, as it's considered to be best practice to install the SSL and then force that redirect to ensure that communication is encrypted. However, for the concern associated with the web UI being tightly coupled to the API response codes or response data, one of the alternatives that I think I would implement instead would be serving the web UI directly from Jinko using their ORM model instead of using REST framework to make remote calls. Thank you. That concludes my midterm oral report.